All right. Well, thank you, Mariana and Cathy, for joining me. I'm really excited. We're going to be talking about family experiences and early interventions and early interventionist experiences in early intervention. And we have some questions prepared. But first, I just wanted the two of you to just briefly introduce yourself. You can say your name and your role or anything else you want to share.
So you can go first, Kathy, if you want.
I'm Cathy Coggins. I'm a program coordinator and an infant development specialist at Life Steps Foundation. And I work with families of children birth to 3 who have delays in their development.
Yeah, so my name is Marianna and I am Lola's mom. Actually, Cathy was the one that helped us, in the program 0 to 3. And we're going to talk about, a little bit more about my experiences, with the program and about Lola. So you'll get to know her more and me.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much for that introduction. All right. So I'm excited to hear from both of you. My first question that I have is, Mariana, if you could please tell us about Lola's health and development during her first 3 years of life.
Of course. Okay, so you're going to have a timeline. It's, it says Lola's milestone timeline. I'm going to just explain a little bit about that and add a few, like notes to it. So, it all started when I was, pregnant with Lola in my 22-week ultrasound. They told me that her heart, something was wrong with her heart. So then I had to, deal with like cardiology visits. So then when she was born, so this, that, like I said, this was when I was 22 weeks pregnant. So I had like 4 more months to kind of like mentally prepare for this. So that was a good thing and a bad thing at the same time, because you're always, wondering what's going to happen. And, she's going to make it, right? Because they told me that her heart, it could be, really bad, like her diagnosis. If you want to Google it, I'm going to, like explain a little bit. It's her diagnosis called tetralogy of Fallot with pulmonary atresia with MAPKIS. So the good thing is that her MAPKIS, that's kind of like something that could be really bad, is because of her lungs. It was a mild case. So when she was born, they had to do a C-section, an emergency one, because her heart was doing weird things. And they took, they just kind of like, here's your daughter, say hi to her. And I'm like, hello? I'm like, Lola. She was so mad when she was born. I was like, I'm so sorry. So they took her away to NICU, to Children's Hospital. And I was, like in John Muir, in another hospital here in Walnut Creek. So, well, that's when her journey really started in the NICU. When she was 3 weeks old, they had her first heart cath. And it was a little bit traumatizing. She was so little. And then after a week later, she had her first open heart. So this open heart was, an easy one. They said that. I'm like, really? It was an easy one. They had to cut her chest open and all. But then they just had to, prep her for the big, repair, like later on. So she was in total in the NICU for 6 weeks. So that's when after 6 weeks have come by, finally she came home. So when she came home, of course, we were so excited, but it was nerve-wracking, like a new mom. She was my first kid. My family's not here. I'm gonna talk about more later about that. So I was alone, with me and my husband, kind of like juggling with all her doctors, all her medical needs, her medicines, and learning to eat. And I mean, Lola, not me, learning, how to do all that. So then when she was 4 months old, she had her second heart cath. And then 2 months later, she had another heart cath. So that will be her third one. And then she had her full repair. This happened in Stanford, in Lucille's Packard's. And it was another 6 weeks of torture. To be honest, like it was really bad for us. She had to have like all these intubations. She couldn't breathe on her own. She couldn't eat on her own. She couldn't, move from the bed. She was always, lying down. She couldn't even, sit up when she could before. So that's when my journey kind of started with therapy. So that's when they introduced me to, a PT first, like, in the hospital, they were like, okay, let's evaluate Lola. What would she need? Where you're gonna, you're gonna be referred to the regional center. And so after, I was, they referred me in the hospital. That's when you want to explain about regional center right now, Cathy, or we do
I
it
can
later?
do it later. That's
Oh,
okay.
good.
Yeah.
Okay. So before coming, Cathy to my life and PT to my life too, like it was kind of like at the same time. Before that, I was home and I had to deal with another doctor, an evaluator, and then another evaluator, I think, before Cathy, and another one before the PT. And then the social worker too, kind of like, hello, I'm regional center, I'm your social worker. And I was like, okay, this is a lot. So, and on top of that, I was dealing with Lola's medical needs because she had an NG tube that's kind of like, the tube goes into your stomach through the nose. I don't know if you've seen it. So yeah, she was doing that. She has like 14 meds, 24 hours, kind of like during the whole day. So it was exhausted. I was exhausted, of course. So then after that, Cathy came in, then the PT, both of them, they're awesome. And at first, of course, it was overwhelming, kind of like, okay, well, I'm going to explain more maybe later. I don't want to talk a lot about the timeline right now. Sorry. Okay, so at 9 months old, she sat down again. She started, doing more physical activities. And then at 10 months old, she said her first word. But let me say that she's always kind of like being nonverbal because, like all her trauma through her mouth. She wasn't like the typical baby that will babble or imitate you like talking or, saying like, blah, blah, mama, like not at all. So she was more into sign language because of Cathy. She taught her how to sign language, basic things, how to say more and all done. So, things that she can, and she was really expressive. Like she had really expressive eyes and you're right, Cathy, she will let you know like what she wanted. And I'm like, okay. But she was always such a good baby kid. Okay, so when she was 14 months old, she started crawling. So if you see a normal, developmental, timeline with a kid, a typically developing kid, you'll see that they start crawling like at 8 months old, right? So Lola was always kind of like a little bit behind with her, developmental milestones. So that was a big one when she started crawling because now she had kind of like strength. But when she did things, she did them really good. So she was like, if I'm going to crawl, I'm going to crawl. If I'm going to walk, I am going to walk. She wasn't like, oh, I'm going to just kind of like try to. No, she will do it. That was kind of like the most crazy thing about Lola. And she still is that way. And I love it. So after, crawling, she had a hard cat when she was 1.5 years. And at that time, that was kind of like the last big intervention. Before, that was kind of like her last big medical intervention when she was 1.5. So that was a really big one. We were like so thrilled that, they were going to be like, let her be for a while. So then speech came into the picture. So I had speech therapy now. So I have PT, speech, and Cathy. Then when she was 24 months old, she stood up. Then 2 months later, she started walking. So that was amazing. And PT, she was like, you know what? She's good. You're doing great. I'm done. Like, just, keep an eye on her and just keep encouraging her and keep doing exercises and you know what to do. And I was like, oh my God. So, like when you celebrate these things, And then after that, that's around this time, Cathy wanted Lola to start preschool. And, like in a program she's going to explain in a bit. And this was, I was so hesitant about doing the preschool because she wasn't talking and she just started walking. And kids at 2, they can be really maybe rough, or they can be more hyperactive, or they already know how to, they have been years walking, or maybe they like months talking. So yeah, Cathy helped me through that, through the school thing. So she started school when she was 28 months old. And Cathy, please explain a little bit more about that.
Well, we have an infant development program that's a full inclusion program, and we have a partnership with a preschool, a 2-year-old class and a preschool through a city arts and rec department. And so we're able to have one infant development specialist in the classroom full time with 2 children who have IFSPs. And then we also work as co-teachers with the teachers in that classroom, and then do 3 hours of home visits a month with the families, so that there's still a strong homeschool partnership and collaboration.
Okay. So then, doing this, it opened my eyes. I mean, it was so good for Lola to be able to be with kids. And then Cathy was my eyes and ears. So she could always, tell me like what she saw, like what can I do to help Lola more, or, like little things to do here and there. So that was, for me, it was so good to have someone in the inside, if you want to call it that, and someone that could help Lola really, engage with other kids, or some, Cathy, because you knew Lola, you could always kind of like translate, and you can, help her, and she felt so secure with you. So I think that's why for her, preschool was a really, that, in Shapelands, she had a really great experience. So I was so sad that I had to leave when she was 3 years old. Like the program had to end for her. And that's when our whole new journey started, the IP journey. But yeah, I think I'm gonna stop there so we can talk more about more things.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of that. It's so helpful. You're starting to
And
mention.
I just had 2 things.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, Marianna, if you mentioned that Lola was born early, right? She
Oh,
was
yes.
born like 4 weeks early. About
Yes.
4 weeks early.
Sorry. Totally
Yeah.
forgot about that. That's
Yeah,
true.
no, I just think that that's important for people to know too, that she was born early. And also, I remember you mentioning that right after she was born, she had to be sent to a different hospital than the one that you were at. So you guys were separated for a while too, right after the birth.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That more, yeah, it was. Yeah, it
Yeah.
was helpful. So yes, that's true. Lola was born 36 weeks old. She was 36 and like 2 days. Every day counts. I always
It
tell them, I'm like,
does.
they count, okay? I know she's considered preemie, but like me, her mother, I'm like, no, she's not. But I know it's just kind of like a thing doctors need to know, and therapists too, because I know it impacts the kids. I know. Now I know. I didn't know that before. So yes, I was, it sounds so weird, separated from Lola. Like I said, I just saw her for a minute. They just said, this is your daughter. And I was, literally in the middle of my C-section. I was, drugged up, and I was like, okay, hi. And then they just took it away. And then before she left for Children's Oakland, I was, in the recovery room. They just wheeled her in, and they say, just said goodbye to your daughter. You see her later. I'm like, will I? Like, I'll see her later, right? But the see her later, it was 4 days later, sorry. So yes, it was. So then the good thing here was that my mom, my mother-in-law, my husband, they were all with Lola during those 4 days. So I was left alone in the hospital. And it wasn't that bad. Like the things I always tell to people is that because she was my first one, I really never had like a normal birth experience. So I didn't feel like a mom at that time. So I was like, okay, well, it's fine. Like I don't have my daughter, but I know she's, been taking care care of, and I had to take care of me so I can take care of her. But now I'm like, oh my God, thank God I didn't know what it was to be a mom, because if not, I would want to be a wreck. If she was my second kid or my third kid, I would be like, hell to the no. And I will be, like rushing with my C-section, to the hospital. But then I think that's a good thing that I really didn't know until now, was to, what is to be a mom. So yeah, thank you, Cathy, for reminding me. It's true. Okay, we can move on if you want, Kimberly.
Yeah. Again, thank you for sharing all that. I think I know we have questions that we've organized. I'm actually looking through them, and I think if it's all right with you, I think we're ready, because you actually touched upon a lot of the first three at least. If you unless you want to share a little bit more about like you were sharing about your own well-being and growth as a parent during those first 3 years of life, if you feel like there's anything else you want to share on about that.
Just a few.
Sure.
Just just a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I'd love to hear.
I think, okay, so the emotional well-being is, a parent has, well, of course, like, okay, so let me just say this is my journey. Of course, it's like our story. So with parents, it can be different, even though we go through the same things. People react differently to, certain situations. So, okay, so this is, kind of like my truth, right? So for me, it was at first I needed to grieve. Like in my pregnancy, I grieved a lot. So because, like you always think about your life going, a certain way, and then you're like, oh my God, like they break, like the class, and like, nope, your life is gonna be different. And you're like, okay. So I think that's kind of like we'll go through grief, and then it's, a lot of stress of the unknown and the what ifs. Like, what if I was like my first 3 years with Lola, I always wondered that what ifs. Like they were so important to me. Like, what if she doesn't talk? What if she doesn't crawl? What if she doesn't, walk, or everything, right? Like, so that was kind of like a lot of stress, and unnecessary added stress, to be honest. Right now, I'm like, why would I stress about that? But I didn't know better, right? Okay, so that was, I think, an important thing to know, that we all go through like a more emotional journey. Sometimes it can be, even worse, or sometimes it's just kind of like a quick one. Like, I think it depends on every family and the way they deal with things. But, at the end, I want to say that Lola now, she's 5. She already went through another heart cath and another open heart, and she's fine. She's doing great. I just want, like to let them all know that she's, doing awesome, and she talks, she runs, she has gone, she is in a really good place right now. And I never expected this, like for her to be able to do all this and, keep growing at the same time. So yay, Lily. And yeah, and I also learned to let her be, to take a step back, and to kind of like let her own body and herself to work, while I give her the tools and the support she needs. And I think it's really important also to mention. And I think
I would just add 2 things.
Yeah,
like you mentioned that you went through some grief and you had your own process. Families can, like, it can happen more than once. It's not like you go through grief and then it's over. Other different things can trigger it. Sometimes it can be certain timelines, or things when they think children should do things, or a birthday, or transition from 3-year-old programs to 5-year-old programs, or just all different times that can bring up different grief again, and a change in expectations. So I think it's really important for people working birth to 3 and 3 to 5 to understand that about families. And then also, There have been studies that show that there's increased anxiety and PTSD in families who have been in the NICU. And it's really important to be aware of that as you're working with families, because if you don't think about their emotional experience, then it impacts the work that you do with them, and there can be roadblocks that rise up because they're processing things in a way that's different than you're thinking about. So it's just really, really important to think about their emotional journey and experience. And I always appreciated that in working with Marianna, she would be very open about what was going on.
Yes. Well, and I appreciate you too, like always listening. I love that you gave me a flashback. When you never like, I said no to something, you're like, can you please like explain to me? Like you will always question me in a good way. Like, okay, explain to me why, so I can, like understand more about why like, why are you saying that? Or why are you, saying no to this? And, and we always find a way to work together and to, find like cool solutions to that, like problem. Or because yeah, PTSD is, oh my God, like I told you, like you'll know, it's just whenever I go to a hospital, the smell, oh my God, like when you wash your hands to, the soap in the hospital, it's like, no, yeah, it will always bring me, the pain, because yeah, sometimes I really don't like to talk. No, I do love to talk about like all this. Sometimes like my Stanford experience, it was, like really bad. So that, I think that's the most stressed and emotional we ever been, because now, we've done okay. Like even though COVID was here and she had her very open heart, it was really great. It was like a really good experience, and I was grateful for that. I was like, yay, finally something good. So yes, that's really important, the PTSD.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for mentioning that, both of you. I really appreciate both your perspectives, and it's so important to address and talk about and have a space to share that, especially for our students to know. So I appreciate that. I wanted to see if you, I know you mentioned a bit about when Lola got referred to early intervention services. And your experience, you chatted a little bit about. Is there anything else you wanted to share about that experience, or Cathy, that you want to share?
Marianna and I had just talked about making sure that everyone understood what Regional Center is. And they provide the Early Start Part C services for children in California. And children are found eligible due to a high risk condition for developmental delay. And that can be things like medical failure to thrive, a parent with a developmental disability, neonatal seizures, prematurity, substance exposure. There's also an established risk condition that has a high probability for developmental delay, or else a developmental delay in more than one area, like cognition, physical development, communication, social or emotional development, or adaptive development. And so when Marianna was talking about the people looking at Lola and assessing Lola to see if she was eligible for Regional Center, that's what they're looking at. And every family entering Early Start through and going through Regional Center get an initial assessment to determine if they're eligible.
Great.
Yes.
And that can be hard for families too, because sometimes it's like she mentioned, there's all these people, they're looking at your child. You've just kind of figured out that there might be something going on. And then they often will do the assessments and write the IFSP in the same day. So you're getting assessed, you're coming up with this document and goals, and you're finding out what services your child needs within a couple hours. And that's a lot for families. So often when you first meet with them, they haven't had a chance to really process or think about why they were referred and what was found out. Even though it's in a document, they often don't haven't seen it maybe, and they don't always know like what, they can't remember because there was so much going on. And so it's just important that even if you get an IFSP, like don't assume that the parents remember or understand everything that's in the IFSP, and make sure that you set that foundation.
Yes, that is so true. Because in my case, I had to deal with all her medical needs. The good thing is I have a good, I mean, I have a good brain. I have a good memory with something. So, but then, like I could remember like all her medical things. And whenever they asked me, like I could always kind of like tell you like why, what she's doing, blah, blah. But then, yeah, yes, it's a lot because in my case too, I had a social worker. I mean, she was awesome. She was from regional center and she did help me a lot because if you have private insurance, because that's another whole world. If you have private insurance, your insurance sometimes can, pay for, PT or, sometimes speech, like depends on every, per family's insurances. So with that, I remember like, they're like, okay, give me your insurance. Like you have to deal with your insurance. I'm like, wait, what? You have to call them and you have to ask them like all of this. And I'm like, wait, what? Like, why do I have to do that? Like I have to deal with all of this. And then you come into my house and you tell me that my daughter needs this, or that, or that she has, she's eligible for blah, blah, whatever, right? And then I have to call the insurance and then meet with all the doctors. At that time, I had like 6 doctors, specialists that I had to see because of Lola. So yeah, I had to, juggle all that for meds, for doctors, deal with insurance to make sure that she was eligible, that, they could pay for services. But the good thing here is that if they didn't, because sometimes she told me that too, like, no worries, like, don't stress about it. I am gonna, like, tell them that your insurance is AWOL, or I don't know, like, we don't know yet. And when it kicks in, and if it kicks in, I'm just gonna pull out and your insurance is gonna do the thing. But then that's also another thing they don't tell you about the insurance, how to deal with them and to, juggle all that.
Yeah, so much to juggle. I can imagine that would feel extremely overwhelming.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh,
And I was so young.
right. Yeah.
Not right now, I was.
Yeah, that was.
Uh,
Yeah, thank you. That's such an important topic and aspect to share. Yeah. Okay. So now I'm curious about home visits with Cathy and what they were like for Marianna and also for you, Cathy. So if you could share first, Marianna, about your experiences about home visits.
of course.
Yeah.
Okay, so I really want to remember the first time I met you, Cathy. I block it out or something. No, but when I met you, Cathy, I remember you, coming to our lives so early on. I don't know if you were the first one or the second one. I don't remember if it was PT first, but you were always so, informative. You were always so professional. You were always so helpful. You always been kind to us. You always had something, kind to say about, me and Lola. And you always listened. So that, like that was a really big one, like listening. Sometimes, like I said before, I don't have my family here, or my husband, like he went to work. So I stayed like the whole day with Lola. And my first year of Lola's life, it was kind of like my own COVID season, like my own quarantine. Like literally I had to quarantine for the first year. I just a doctor's therapist or like whoever I needed to see. I didn't have my friends here. Like, I couldn't see my friends or their kids because, we didn't know if Lola, her immune system was it was good. The good thing it is her immune system is great, but we didn't know that when she was, in her first year of life. So, and then I love that I could always rely on Cathy because she was always so punctual. I know I made fun of you with this. I'm like, you're so punctual. Like in my culture, no one is punctual. We're like, oh yeah, 10. Okay, I'll see you an hour later or something. So I really love that I could rely always on Cathy being so punctual. That I know that's funny, but it's a good thing to have. And also Cathy helped us a lot. Like she introduced me to this world, and I didn't know like how much help we really needed until years go by. Like the first year, I know it was hard sometimes on us because I always wanted Lola to thrive on her own. Always was like wondering and asking like, can we be done? Like, is this really necessary? Like, do we have to? Really? Like, I always ask those questions whenever like the 6 months mark came in, because that's when she really evaluated Lola and her milestones. And I know you always be like, this will help her. This is good for her. Remember, like 0 to 3 is like when their brain developed like 100%, 80%. I don't know what I'm saying. 80% of the brain develops at this time, and I really didn't know that. Like, I don't think anybody as a parent, we didn't know this. We have no idea what we're doing. We're just like, oh, we're just gonna be parents, hooray! And our kid's gonna be fine. And when you get all these challenges, you're like, okay, I didn't know you needed to do like like the pyramid, right? Like all this to get here, and to like to really get to the top. So for Cathy to be able to advise me, give me resources, coach me, and guidance, that was so helpful. I think like every week I saw you, I grew up a little bit more. You helped me, Lola, grow a little bit more. And I love implementing your ideas. Like she will always be so creative to tell me, ideas and solutions. And if she didn't know an answer to something, I love that you were always like, you know what, I'll get back to you. Let me, kind of like make sure I'm giving you the right answer. And I love that too, that you just didn't, tell me something just because, just to tell me something. So that was really helpful, your lists, your your guidance, and everything I needed for Lola. And that you pushed me for the preschool. I will always appreciate you for that. Because if it wasn't for you, I don't think I will ever, throw Lola to that life, because I wasn't ready to let her go. And you kind of like push me always in the right direction to, help Lola grow. Thank you.
Yeah, I would say for me, our home visits were truly a collaborative partnership. And one thing to just know about the way that we did home visits, I just used what Marianna and Lola had at home. I didn't bring separate things into their house. We just used whatever they had. So we would problem solve together how to use those things to build on the skills that we wanted her to develop next. I think the other thing to think about is like we want the parents to follow their child's lead, but we also want to follow the parents' lead. And what was important to Marianna as far as Lola's development, and how could I best support them with that? So I used a lot of early childhood mental health strategies that I had learned. Like one of my favorites, which Kimberly knows, is called ports of entry. So with Marianna, like if she wasn't ready to talk about something like Lola going to preschool, I waited until there were things that she talked about her wanting to do that would fit into her going to preschool. But I didn't force her to do something when she wasn't ready to do it either. And then also, I always appreciated that it's called parallel process. So like I treated Marianna with the respect and care and support that I wanted her to treat Lola with, and to, appreciate Lola for who she was. And I appreciated Marianna for who she was. And I listened respectfully like I wanted her to do with Lola. And that's really, really important in the work that we do. But what I most appreciated was like Marianna would tell me things like when she had different ideas or didn't agree with me. she would talk to me about it, and she would explain like why or what was going on. And she also would ask, like, what can we do to help with this? So she was a very active participant in our sessions, and it makes it so much more powerful to partner with parents in that way. Yeah.
Yeah, encourage that.
Yeah. Oh, great. Thank you so much for sharing. I love hearing about your partnership, and I'm excited for my students to hear it too. So one aspect of home visits is going into the community, and you can either. So I'm curious, Marianna, about your experience going into the community with Lola. You can either share about your experience with home visits or just in general what that was like for you, and yeah, your experience going out there in the community with Lola.
Okay, yes. Like I said before, I introduced Lola after her first year of life, of course, to the community. I mean, like to really go out there.
Yeah.
So after she turned 1, I wish I could show you a picture. She, like the way she's always been petite, and she looked like so young, and she was a baby, right? But I mean, like sometimes 1-year-olds, can be running. Sometimes they will babble a lot, or they have strong opinions. And so when I took her to the park every day. Every day. I walked there, and that was kind of like my mental health, right? So I walked there with Lola. I, brought like a picnic blanket. I will sit down because, she didn't crawl at that time. So she will just sit down and play with her toys and, see the kids around and the park and the structures. And so I kind of like introduced her little by little. And then I started meeting friends there. So it was fun, meeting other moms and be able to, play with them. So, of course, I'm not going to say everyone is like this because that's not true. But there are some parents that they can be really rude. I mean, they have rude comments to say. For example, when you see Lola, you're like, oh, like normal talk, like, oh, how old is your kid? Oh, my kid is like 1 or 1.5. And how is your kid? I'm like, oh, she's 1-ish. I don't remember at the time, right? She's like, oh, so why is she not walking? Or like you will see their faces. Sometimes if they don't say anything, you will see like at their face, they will make a special expression, like curious, like why, or like what is happening, or like, oh, I thought she was like 6 months old, she looks so cute and little, like, I'm like, what? Like, how dare you? Like, what? And I'm really outspoken, Cathy, right? So I will always be like, oh, okay, yeah, no, she's 1. And yeah, you know what? Like she has a heart issue. She already had like 2 open hearts, 3 heart caths, and I will kind of like tell her story in a bit. And then their face will change again, right? Be like, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm like, why are you sorry? She's here. She's thriving. Like, no, don't give me your sorries, please. Because that's one of the things that people sometimes they don't understand, or moms, they live in this perfect world, and like sometimes that happens. I mean, those are type of moms, I don't want to like kind of like say that, but those type of people sometimes their life is perfect, so if something is different, they're like, oh, like, okay. And yeah, like just they will tell you, I mean, sorry, I kind of like back up. They will just make rude comments about my kid. Not all the time, but it happened a lot. A lot of those comments, little comments like, I'm so sorry, why she's not walking, why she's not talking, she looks so little. And I mean, that was kind of like my experience at first, and then I just let it go. Honestly, at first I was so mad, I was so sad. It made me feel like I was a bad mom to Lola, because, oh my god, now I want to cry. Because like people could see that she wasn't like thriving, but they really didn't know like the whole story behind it, right? Like, so that's why I always like I always tell Lola, oh my god, I'm so sorry. Oh my god. that I am so proud of her because, like, and, like sometimes bigger kids will be so mean to her. Like, oh, I don't understand what you're saying. Like, talk correctly. And I'm like, and, like this was when she was a little bit older, maybe when she was like 4. And I'm like, okay, kid, like, don't be like that. Like, you cannot be saying, those things like, where's your mom? Like, I'm going to tell your mom that, she should raise you right. But I know kids can be kids and it's okay. And I always tell Lola because she felt so bad. Lola started crying. I don't know really what she really said to her because I was kind of like in another place. I was, watching her in the distance and I saw her crying and feeling so bad. And I'm like, Lola, what happened? She's like, she's so mean. Like, I don't know what she really said, but I did tell Lola, like, you know what? You're awesome. Like, I always try to empower her and be like, don't pay attention to those comments. Like, people are mean, kids can be mean, you just be you and you're awesome. Sorry, I can't.
Okay. You sound, I mean, it's beautiful to hear your journey about how you've become such an advocate for Lola, for you.
I think it's important for people going into the field to understand what the experience is for parents going out in the community,
Yeah.
because there's a lot of judgment out there
Yeah.
about how parents parent, and
Yeah.
it impacts parents. And there can be a judgment in people in the field about, oh, this parent's not taking their kids to the park, or this parent isn't giving them outdoor experiences. And I think we need to understand why that's happening and what it feels like to families if they're resistant. And the thing that Marianna did, she did, even though this was hard, every day she took Lola out into the community every single day. And how strong are you for continuing to do that, even though it was painful at times, and for you and for Lola, but you taught her this lesson, like, that you were just going to continue and not let other people affect what you did together. And
Oh yeah.
powerful. But I think we as professionals need to also be aware of when we're judging parents for the experiences they're not providing or for their children, and think actually carefully with them about what's it like, and do they need help thinking about how to respond when parents ask questions. Like, that's a great part of your services you can provide for parents.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so important to address. There's so much judgment out there. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. But then you learn, right? You learn that parents are, like people sometimes they're just mean because they're born, I don't know, they're raised that way. I have no idea what happened. I just learned to not judge anymore, because of course, I think we're just as humans, we're judgy. And sometimes we just come to conclusions and be like, oh, like, why is she not doing this? Or why is she not doing that? And then now, it takes a while. Now, she's 5 and now I learned and I don't care anymore. I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to celebrate my kid, whatever she does, even though she does it years later, I don't care. And I don't care if people knows it. I want people know that she got there or she did this. And, like the good thing is that my friends, we all celebrate together, Lola's triumphs. And that's a good thing, like to have friends that really, help you empower the kids and to help you, like they don't see the labels that I know you're just going to talk about a little bit more about the labels later. And they just love your kid because of who she is.
Yeah, that's so important too, to surround yourself with a community that celebrates you and Lola. Yeah.
Yes. And push back to all those mean people and just
Exactly.
make them feel bad.
Yeah, exactly.
Just kidding. Okay. So sorry.
No, I so appreciate you sharing. Thank you. Yeah, so I know that we chatted before about your cultural background, and I don't know if you want to share anything about, or if any of this relates to what we were just talking about, but I'm curious about your experiences with culture and how that shaped your service or your experiences with services and being Lola's parent.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Okay. So, okay. I am Mexican, born and raised. I moved here 8 years ago. So that explains my accent, if you were wondering. I mean, I'm talking about the people hearing me. So, okay. So one thing you need to understand, I come from a family of 6 in Mexico. All my family is back home. My husband's family is back home. All, my siblings too. Like, I'm the only one here. And one thing is that this wasn't my plan all along, of course. Like, I didn't want to stay here. It's not that I don't like, California. I love California. Don't get me wrong. I love it. But when I was pregnant, I always wanted to have, Lola to have her grandparents around, her cousins around, my big family, right? Her uncles and aunts. And so then, that was one of the things that we decided not to do, is go back home. So we decided to stay here. And that was one hard decision we had to do. And we still do this decision every day, kind of like, okay, every time it gets rough, I'm like, we do this for Lola. So then, okay, so that is one thing. The other thing is
Marianna, part of that was based on your doctor's input, right? Because of medical condition, that's why you decided you had to stay here.
Oh yes, thank you. Of course, because of her doctor was really. She was like, you know what? You take her to Mexico, and we know she won't survive. I'm like, why? Because, like I said before, her medical diagnosis, it's a big one. Like, it's a tough one. Like, the doctor in Stanford is the only one that knows how to fix, the MAPKIS, and he has like this really cool, kind of like a surgery input to do it, like in a less invasive way, or I don't know. So yes, we had to stay here for her because of her medical needs, and then I'm glad we did. Of course, I will always be glad we did, because we had all this help, and we still have all this help. Like her IEP. Well, I talk about later the IEP, but yeah, she still have speech, and she has OT now, and she has like all these resources that in Mexico is so hard to get. Like, I know I'm always tell people that I'm so grateful to be here, and I will never take it for granted. So the other thing is that my family, I mean my mom, and like we are raised, like you have this idea, like labels are a bad thing. Like, oh, if they label you, like if you have a HDHD, or if you have, like Lola speech delays, or she has, her her heart, thing, and she has the George syndrome too. I forgot to say about that. Like, she still has, another extra diagnosis that is the George, and with the George comes like all these different things. And so sometimes it's like, don't tell people she has that. Like, people will tell you that. Like in Mexico, if they make you feel ashamed, sometimes. I'm not gonna say like all Mexico is like this, because that's not true. But sometimes I think this really happens most of the time, that if they tell you something about your kid that you don't like, it's like, nope, nope, that's not true. You are wrong. You have no idea what you're talking about. And she's like the psychologist, right? And she's like, well, I'm telling you, so you get the help. No. So labels in Mexico, and I think in the world anyways, they can be bad. And people are like, they target you because you have a label. So, but for me, like, it took me a while to understand this, like talking with Cathy, and then, with a PT, and then, like, time goes by, you really start to understand that you cannot suffer in silence. First of all, like, no, like, you have to give your kid a voice. Like, if they have a label, it doesn't matter. Like, the other way around, a label is not something bad. It's something that it will help the professional help them. you know, like if you have a label, it's not to label you to be like, oh, you're a label, you have an IEP, something must be wrong with you. No, like the other way around. I think like the label helps everyone to understand more about the kid needs and how to really help the kid get there or thrive, or, you know, I don't know. I feel that culturally labels, they make you feel shamed, confused. You know, friends, families, they're just like, sometimes they don't get it. But when you boys, I think when you talk more about this and you really, you know, talk about them with no taboo, right? Like just talking about them and being open, they're like, oh, okay. Like I feel that more people will be able to to not see them negatively, you know, like a label. So does that answer the question?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Cathy, is there anything you wanted to share while we're talking about this subject?
I mean, I just think it's important to think about families' cultural experience, but not make broad judgments about them based on their cultural background. Um, but it definitely, you know, I remember Marianna, like with releases, like I'd always tell her, I have to get a release in order to talk to the physical therapist. And she'd be like, what? You Americans, you like, it's like, you know, it's just funny, like, you know, or explaining to her why this or that, like, um, even things about the school system, because the school system in Mexico is different than the school system in the US. So certain things you just take for granted that people understand about school, like Marianna didn't, because that's not her experience of what school was like. And so it's just important to think about, you know, it impacts, everything impacts the work that we do. And luckily, Marianna was open and willing to talk to me about like her experiences. And also, like, I didn't feel threatened, like that I saw things like a different way. Like, we were okay to see things in a different way, and to learn. You know, I learned a lot from working with Marianna. It enriched my experiences a lot in my life, you know, so I appreciate learning from her.
Yeah.
Yeah. And learning from you too, Cathy. Yeah. It's true about the schools. I remember talking about that a lot because, yeah, if I was back home, like for example, if I need to go back home right now, you know, Lola's in a good place. I mean, surgically speaking, her heart is good. She can have pass 5 years more or more without surgeries. Yay. But then school wise, I'm always worried because it's like, okay, we don't have the resources. We do have them. I mean, Mexico, we have a lot of great resources. People are really, you know, they come here, they do their masters here, and they go, you know, back home to Mexico and, you know, implement them. But everything is privately owned. I mean, like you have to pay for all the services. And in schools, sometimes schools, they're like, your kid needs help. Can you help your kid? Instead of being like, me as a school, I am going to help you help your kid. No, that doesn't exist. And well, that's, you know, I don't think it does really. So that's kind of like the one thing I really do appreciate about being here is that they will all give, it doesn't matter where you come from, who you are, they will help you. They will help you help your kid. Like the kid comes first. And that's something that amazes me, honestly. And I am grateful for that, like having all this and to be able to learn from like all of you. And yeah, one day maybe I can go back to Mexico and be like, yeah, let's do this. Let's learn from America, like education wise.
Mm,
So yeah.
yeah. Oh, so interesting. Thank you for sharing all that. That's really, really helpful. So now I'm going to move on to the topic of transition from the IFSP to the IEP. Cathy, I'm going to ask if you want to first just share about the transition and anything you want to share about your experience helping Lola and Marianna through that transition. And then we can hear from Marianna.
Yeah, I'll just briefly explain a little about the transition process for people who aren't familiar, from Part C to Part B. And usually around between 30 months and 33 months, the case manager from the regional center we'll set up a meeting with the family and the school district to start talking about the transition process. And so that the family can start learning about what options and resources are available through the school district and what the assessment and IEP process is like. But I think it's always important to keep in mind that it's a transition process and that it takes months to go through and to think about together. And for parents, there's a lot that happens, especially as it gets closer to the end. So when children are with regional center, they often also have what they call a status 2 evaluation to determine when Part C ends, some children continue to be eligible for regional center and other children aren't eligible anymore. After 3 regional centers for children who have lifelong developmental disability. So not only are they getting the school district assessments, but they're also getting assessments from a psychologist with regional center to determine if they're eligible for that service. And then there can also be other services that they're involved in, like CCS, that might be also evaluating them. So they can have several evaluation teams looking at their children at the same time, and they can be confused about what's the purpose of this evaluation and that evaluation. And so it's just really important to stay in communication with families as they're going through this process and to help explain to them what's going on and make sure that things are moving forward and that they understand. And then also another thing that is important to realize is that families are having to end anything that's through regional center ends on their 3rd birthday. And so like they can be having speech and PT and specialized instruction, and all of those people who they've worked with maybe for years are going to be, and those services are ending at the same time as they're having to start a whole new system that they're not familiar with. So it's very emotional for families, and understandably so. So anyway, I just think it's important for people to consider like kind of the emotional part of what's going on with the transition. And the other thing is that birth to 3, they say children have a developmental delay. And a lot of times parents interpret that like, and rightly so, sometimes children do catch up, but at 3, it becomes a little more clear if a child's going to continue having services or if they haven't caught up yet. And parents are having to also come to terms with maybe their child's going to need services for longer than they thought, or have a lifelong condition where they're going to need things throughout the rest of their life. So there's just a lot that happens during that transition process that's important to think about with families. And if you're working with 3 to 5-year-olds, just I think having an understanding of what families have gone through as they're entering your services is important too.
Yeah. You touched it all, Cathy. Yes, that's exactly how we feel. Like you said before, grief, it's not one time feeling. It's all the time. I mean, it's true. We talked about, not here, but I was talking yesterday with Cathy, and it's just funny that now Lola is 5, like I said. She's gonna do another transition now. She's transitioning to kindergarten, and I'm like, oh my God, how many more transitions? Oh.
Uh-oh. I noticed that she was frozen.
Oh, really? Oh. Hey.
Hi, Kimberly.
Okay, so continue.
Oh, you're muted, Kimberly.
Oh, you're muted.
Sorry.
Okay.
I'm sorry, my internet cut out, but it looks like when I cut out, fortunately, it looks like the 2 of you still is recording.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think it made Marianna the host, so I think we're okay. Yay.
Responsibility, yay.
Woo. Okay.
All right.
I
So
feel so important now. I'm a host. Okay. No, I was just saying, I was starting to talk about that. Yeah, like Cathy said before, that grief is not just one time feeling in all this. And now that Lola is 5, now I'm transitioning to kindergarten, and I'm like, yes, another transition. And sometimes in a weird way, I got used to this, and I'm okay. But then at the same time, it's just like every surgery or everything Lola has to go through medically, it's just like I always think it will be easier, but sometimes it gets harder and harder to let people go. And because you're so used to, like for me, this transition, like when she turned 3, it was bittersweet. It was like, yay, she's 3. You have done this and done that. You were talking. She started kind of talking when she was 3. Saying words, and she was already walking and running and doing like all these great things. And I was like, yay, she's so ready, for the world. And so it was bittersweet to let Miss Julie go in the program in preschool. I really loved her and really loved Caitlyn's. And then Cathy go, and then her speech therapy go. And I already was used to her, and Lola was used to her, and meeting new people again. I just felt that everyone in my life left me. I'm talking about the extra people. No, I mean my husband, It's just that it just felt that way. Like I was lost again. I'm like, what? Like again? I had to go through like the IEP that is so overwhelming. Honestly, the IEP for me was new. I've never heard of an IEP ever in my life. That was like a whole different world. And now, like, yes, like Cathy said, like sometimes, okay, so Regional Center said, peace out. You don't need us anymore. Lola is okay. You just need the school district. And I'm like, okay. So getting to meet the new teacher, getting to meet, like the psychologist, and then the speech therapist, and then the extra people you need to meet. And then she's February, so she entered the school at the end of the school kind of, cycle. Yes, the school cycle. So then that was a hard transition, and I was always so happy that Cathy was willing to keep in touch. I know that you have rules, like in Life Steps and in every other, you know, um, like you have rules. I know you have to sign everything, right, Cathy? So I know she's just gonna be like, okay, I'm just gonna keep in touch with you. But I was like, I want you to, and like if I contact you, can I contact you? She was like, of course. And I'm like, okay. So I was glad that Cathy really did help me to get through the IEP. She did go to the IEP, like she was my ears and eyes in the school. So that helped the IEP team to kind of like do a better assessments of Lola's needs instead of just me. Sometimes they're like, you're a parent, what do you know? Sometimes they make you feel that way. I'm not saying that made me feel that way 100%, but sometimes they do because they don't know you. And I understand that. Like they don't know how you think, who you are, like what, they don't know your background, right? So, but then I'm like, I'm a parent, I'm her parent, I know what's best for her or whatever. So that's kind of like sometimes it's hard that they don't trust you or they don't ask for your opinion. Sometimes, I'm saying like always. And then also, what I was gonna say? Oh, also you always be in a fighting mode. So you have to also understand that about parents, that we always sometimes fighting. We're like, okay, we're fighting for our kid to have this. We're having for our kid to have that. And sometimes they're not willing to. They're like, no, your kid doesn't need it because she didn't have it before. I'm like, yes, exactly, because she didn't have it before. Maybe she does need it. And they will kind of just brush you off and be like, no, she'll be fine. Just we'll see in a year for other IEP. So yeah, sometimes we're in a fight mode, like, give me this, please. Like, she needs it. Or like, hello, I'm her mother. Like, trust me, trust my instincts. Like, why are you not listening to me? That's why I really appreciate Cathy always listening to me and really, like voicing my concerns. Thank you, Cathy. So then I will only tell, I don't know if you can really stay in contact with your families when you have to let them go. I mean, not let them go, when they're 33 and all of this. But if you can always kind of like check on them after the IEP or maybe before the IEP, honestly, I think they will appreciate it. Because sometimes before the IEP, you're like, oh, I'm ready. I read it. I'm good. This is awesome. Okay, let's do it. But after the IEP, sometimes you're like, oh my God, what happened? Like, what? Like, what? You're just like, no, like, just throw you the IEP and all the services. You're like, what? Yeah, and sometimes you don't even know what you can do. Like, you can always ask for another IEP. You can always ask for things, and parents don't know that. Sometimes I'm always telling parents, like, fight for it. You go tell them, I always, telling them, like, yeah, you think your kid needs PT. Yes, ask for it. Like, just tell the teacher, like, doesn't matter. That's your job, and that's your job to advocate for your kid. So yeah, I think I always be appreciative of Cathy, always, having my back and being there for me, even though she wasn't Lola's therapist anymore. So yeah, because we became friends, right, Cathy? So I consider her always my friend after, a year after being into our lives, coming to our lives. So yes, the struggle is real sometimes.
Yeah, that transition, there's so much there. Cathy, did you want to share anything else?
No, I think Marianna expressed
Yeah.
it well.
Yeah, I so appreciate you sharing all that. So important to address. So one of the things that I really have noticed with you is that you are become such an advocate for Lola, but also for inclusion and diversity. And one of the questions that I have is, how did you become passionate about inclusion, diversity, and being an advocate for Lola? I think we touched upon this a bit throughout the interview. I mean, I really heard that coming through with your answers. But if there's anything else you want to share about this,
Maybe.
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 Yeah.
No, yeah. So I think the big part for me was watching Cathy. So, like I said before, this was a whole new world for me. I never had this growing up. And living here in California, you get to meet, I feel like, I don't know, people from around the world. So, you kind of like, I feel like just living here, you get that diversity culturally, like, people in general, like how the people think and do things, and you're like, oh, I don't know, I'm always interested about that. I love that. I love hearing people's stories and how, they do things in their country. Or, her PT, she was from India, so I love talking about her about that. I was like, oh, tell me more. And what do you do? Oh, really? You eat that? Oh, like, it's just, I love it. I know, it's just so interesting to me personally. But then watching, Cathy and having her PT and her speech therapist, I feel that they all taught me by, her different views of, helping Lola, or, their stories. I love, asking Cathy about her stories, about their families, and, how they, from 0 to 100, their kids, thriving, and, watching Lola thrive herself. Like, I think if Lola, she was a typically developing kid, I don't think I will ever be this passionate about, this subject. But now, because she is, I really like it. Like, I really love telling people, like, it doesn't matter, your kid is not different. Like, just, I don't know, like, just, I don't know, it just made me fall in love with inclusion, like watching Lola grow and watching Cathy do her thing. I don't know, I think that's the only thing I want to say.
I love that. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. All right. Just have one other question for you, Mariana and Cathy, at the end. If you want to share anything, you can too. But so my question is, I'm curious if you have any like big lessons that you've learned while being a parent of Lola that you would like my students to know about or educators to know about.
Yes, I do.
Great.
I love, okay,
Great.
so it's kind of like a conclusion of all we talked about, right?
Yeah.
So the number one thing for me will be listening. So listen to your parents, I mean, also listen to your parents, to the parents of the kid you're working with, right? So I think it's really important to listen to their why they do things and why they don't do things. So yeah, I know we talked about this, but that's kind of like the most important thing
Mhm.
really for me as a parent, kind of like to listen, to really listen and to pay attention to kind of like our cues, because sometimes I know people are not so verbal like me. Like I love to just talk and I will say my truth and that's the way I am. But I know some people they're not. So I think kind of like they will give you kind of like breadcrumbs and clues. And I think that's really important to listen about that. And because we as parents know, I think we have the gut, like as you had your gut feeling like as a parent, you know what's best for your kid. You're like, I know what's best. I know what they can do. But sometimes you don't have the tools to do it. Like you don't learn this at school, unless of course you go to school to learn this. But as a normal parent, just like we have no clue. And sometimes we think we do know, but we don't. So yes, always be humble about that. Like Cathy said, don't force them. And of course, be creative. That will be my number two. Be creative and always come with like creative ideas and to do things or create solutions. For an example with Cathy, I love this one is that I I don't like messes. Like I love my house to be, clean the way it's supposed to be. I don't know. I just my mom was like that, and it's her fault. But then that's the way I am, and I really didn't like, Lola like touching things, and she's like, yeah, let Lola play. Like yes, she can play and get all messy, and I'm like, no. Like I don't like that. Like no. Or she's like, yeah, go to the sand and bury Lola in the sand. I'm like, no, But that was just me being crazy. But then the thing is that Cathy was like, she never judged me. She's like, okay, tell me just why you don't do that. Okay, cool. So then she's like, look, I found an idea. You can, use a Ziploc bag, put like, I don't know, like a shaving cream inside with colors and, like bucket. And she can play with that, like you can do things with that. So, I always appreciate that about Cathy, that she will never, like, enforce me to do something, but she will come with creative ideas to do the same thing to have the same outcome. So that will be, my number two. And my last one, of course, I think this one is also really important, is like Cathy said, encourage to work together. Like you really have to be a team. Maybe I feel sometimes like personalities will crash and it's not always, you can't always have this or always expect this with the families because we have different personalities, right? But then do the best you can to work together. If they are the typical parent that don't want to do the things, while you're with the kid because you are the therapist and they just need to do laundry or they need their 5 minutes to cool off or whatever they need to feel better. Um, just explain why it's important because I know a lot of you have this problem. I'm guessing. I don't want to, say that you all have this problem, but I think it's a common problem. And I think it's just, explain the why. And, little by little, I think they will understand and then become maybe passionate and see that if they really give the tools to their kids themselves, as, as me as mom, as well as mom, it will be even more beneficial than just having an hour a week visit and you don't even really learning the why or the how. So yeah, that will be, I think that will be my three things.
So good. Those are such great lessons. Thank you so much for sharing. Cathy, did you want to share anything else?
I would just say that Marianna hit the ones that, it's so funny, Marianna, because my first one was to leave your ego at the door as the early interventionist and carefully listen. And that's what you said too. I just think it's so important to listen to what parents are telling you. And Marianna also mentioned like their body language or what they're not saying. Like it's like listening to everything. And I remember one time I had asked her if somebody could observe one of our sessions, and she said, oh yeah, but she wasn't her usual like bubbly self. And then she texted me later and said, actually, I don't want somebody to observe our session. And I was like really happy that she felt comfortable telling me that. And I talked to her the next time and told her I was happy that she was comfortable telling me that she was not comfortable having somebody observe. And then I just said I wanted to know a little more about that. And she explained to me, like, when they were in the hospital, the residents would always come and just look at them like, just like subjects, like not people. And that idea of somebody coming and observing her really bothered her. And it was her house, and she wanted to be comfortable in her house and decide who comes into her house. And that was like such a great lesson for me. Like things like having students observe or having new staff observe. It's just so everyday to us, but we don't know what it means to families. And that was a great lesson. My second one was what she said. I just put truly believe that parents are their child's best teacher and that they know their child the best. We as professionals know a lot about the field and we know a lot about development and ways to support it, but we do not know that child and that family the best. And you truly have to believe that the parents do know them the best, and that that's how you form the collaborative partnership with them, not by thinking you're the expert and that you know best. And I got in that trap with her also. I wrote in a report that she wasn't providing the messy experiences that I thought was so important. And she was reading the report and she said, really, Cathy? Really? You had to write this down? And I was like, it made me think. And it's like, no, that was my ego. Like that was not helping Lola and it wasn't helping her. And I wrote my report differently. But, just think carefully about what you're saying and why you're doing things. Is that because you want to feel like you're a good professional, or is it because it's really helping the child and the family? So I think that those are the things that I would really emphasize. Yeah, I just think that, I have always been grateful that Marianna and Lola came into my life and that I learned as much from them as they learned from me. And I, I would, my life would not be as rich without having had them as part of it. Yeah.
Thank you, Cathy.
Mhm.
Likewise.
Mhm.
Oh, so good. Thank you so much. I have really, really enjoyed this, and I'm so excited to share this with my students. I think I learned so much, and I know they will too. Before I stop recording, is there anything else that you all want to share? I just want to give you a chance in case you're thinking about something else you want to share.
No, I think we said it all, right, Cathy? And
We
even more.
both could talk forever.
I know.
We're passionate about this subject.
Yes. Yes.
I love it. Great. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and stop recording then.